So today I want to discuss a couple of things on this podcast. The Epstein files, the potential shutdown, immigration, and the midterm elections, which I think I'll start with because there's a lot to digest here with what's been going on here. And I've been saying, along with some other people for a while now, that Trump is going, that everything that Trump was doing by sending the National Guard in to these cities, to having ICE, all of these were distractions in terms of what his plan was going to be, which was trying to steal the election and trying to end it completely. And I was correct because a few days ago, last week, FBI agents went to Fulton County and seized all the elections, over 700 ballot boxes. And the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was there on the ground too. And apparently, nobody got a heads up with this. Nobody seems to know why, but clearly this is the beginning. Number one, why is Tulsi Gabbard there? She's the director of intelligence, has nothing to do with the elections. Now, to understand this, this is the 2020 elections. You know, the ones that Donald Trump keeps bragging that he won and that was stolen from him, except it wasn't. And he actually tried this many times to prove it in court that the election was stolen. Giuliani tried it too. In fact, all of these lawyers that tried to rig the election all lost their license. They went to trial or they had to settle, and they either lost their license to practice law and or went to jail. Giuliani can't practice law anymore, but he's not in jail. In fact, he had to pay the two ladies that he defamed about it. And 6 years later, Trump is still on the fact that he won the election fair and square. And I don't understand why a person who literally is now the president of the United States is still on the fact that he won the election 6 years ago. And let's just say, for argument's sake, he finds something that says he won. There's nothing you can do about it now. But let's just say, for argument's sake, if Donald Trump won the election, then wouldn't he illegally be president now? And wouldn't he have to be arrested for being the president past his term? And if that's the case, wouldn't Joe Biden have to be arrested for pretending to be the president if he lost? Because if the courts couldn't find the evidence, if it didn't work for them in all the courts, and they tried for months saying, we have evidence that the election was rigged, that Donald Trump was the true winner, but they couldn't present it in court. In every case they went to, they could not prove that. And if they couldn't prove it 6 years ago, what are they going to do now? Go through every single thing and then say this is illegal? Okay, fine. Let's play Trump's stupid idiocy game. And let's just say they decide that yes, they were right. The election is illegal. It was rigged, just like we said all along, and Joe Biden lost. Okay, now what? What are you going to do then? You can't take it back. Joe Biden already was the president. You're the president now. If it was rigged, okay, let's just say for argument's sake, because we all know what's going to happen. They're going to go through every single thing, which, by the way, is illegal. What they're doing is illegal, which is why Georgia said, we are suing. And they are suing. Because This is what dictatorship is. This is what authoritarianism is. They will do everything they can to get rid of, to sow doubt and fear in people so that so they're afraid to go to the elections. And this is how they become president for life. And Donald Trump's already been trying that. When Putin told him to get rid of mail-in ballots, guess what? He made the announcement. I'm signing an executive order getting rid of mail-in ballots. There's only one problem with that. He doesn't have the power to do that. He can sign whatever law he wants. That doesn't mean he has the authority to do that, because elections are held by states, not by the federal government. And when Donald Trump is saying the states are an agent of the federal government, what the fuck is he talking about? No president has ever said states are an agent of the federal government. If that's the case, then you don't need a governor and you don't need a mayor, because the states are agents. But if you notice his wording carefully, he's not saying to get rid of elections. He's saying Republicans need to nationalize these elections. Whatever that means, I don't know. But you notice he's saying Republicans should nationalize elections. He doesn't, as usual, he doesn't explain it. As usual, he doesn't explain it. He just, Republicans should nationalize elections. And then you have Steve Bannon, who has no credibility whatsoever because he already went to jail for this, says ICE agents should surround voting poll sites. That's alarming. That's, first of all, that's intimidation. Because they're basically going to supervise and watch over you, and by any stretch of the imagination, they could intimidate you into voting the way they want you to vote, which is not how elections are supposed to work. In a democratic country, people have the right to vote for whoever they want. Republican, Democrat, it don't matter. And when you're sending ICE agents to voting sites, what do they do? Make sure you vote for the right person? Make sure you vote for one party? Threats? First of all, sending ICE agents there is illegal automatically. Voting is supposed to be private. Who I vote for is no one's business. Can I tell you who I voted for? Yeah, but that's on me. And taking all of these elections from Georgia, from Fulton County, is against the law, because now you're taking people's private info. And here's the thing. We already have voter ID laws in this country, and we've had them for years. And yet Congress wants to add something called the SAVE Act to implement voter ID, to implement a law to make sure illegal immigrants don't vote. And just to show you how stupid Congress is, they enacted the voter ID law years ago. But most of these people who are in Congress now enacted that law years ago. And if you're in Congress, you better fucking know what the laws you've passed. And how is it all of a sudden Donald Trump comes to the picture and they're like, yeah, we should make it a law. But you already made it a law 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever the law is made. Why? And if you're in Congress, you should know the laws you made because they're all public. It's out in the open. It's on a website. Anybody can just look it up. How can you create a law for a law that's already a law? You can amend a law. You can change a law. But how can you create a bill to make into a law for something that's already a law? You understand what I'm saying here? And illegal immigrants know that they cannot register to vote because they will get deported for committing a crime, because it is against the law to register to vote. Which is why when you go on a job application, they say, do you need sponsorship at this? Will you require any sponsorship? What? So I don't understand why Congress has all of a sudden gotten stupid and not telling Donald Trump, Mr. President, we already have a voter ID law. There's no reason why. And how is it that Democrats know this and Republicans are like, we need these laws because otherwise illegals are going to vote, are going to register. But illegals know they're not going to register to vote because they can't for fear of deportation. And mail-in ballots have been around for years. How can Donald Trump say it's fraudulent when he himself has done mail-in balloting? How is it that he's saying it's, and why is he taking advice from Putin? Putin tells him mail-in balloting is fraudulent, so Trump says okay. Do they even have mail-in balloting in Russia? No, they don't. And how do you think the troops that are overseas, how do you think they vote? Absentee mail-in ballots. That's how they do it. If you take that away, how are they going to vote? If mail-in ballots is fraudulent, how did Donald Trump do it? But they are counted. They're counted because they're just counted. They're the last to be counted, but they count. How is it fraud? And explain to me. See, and I love how he says that it's all rigged and it's all fraudulent and it's all a scam, but he never elaborates on how that is possible. He just says it's fraudulent, it's a scam, Democrats are rigging it, and we have to stop it, and we need to take control of it so the Democrats can't do it. Okay, great. But you don't have an argument. You're saying it's rigged. How is it rigged? You say they cheated. How did they cheat? You say illegal people are voting, but you can't prove it. And I go to poll sites when I register to vote. It's usually not on its own. It's usually when you're going to register to get a state ID or a driver's license or whatnot. They're asking, would you like to register to vote? But voter ID in this country, in fact, if I type in Google, do voter ID laws exist? Here you go with the answer. 36 states have laws requesting or requiring voters to show some form of identification at the polls. The remaining 14 states and Washington, D.C. use other methods to verify. Okay? So, every state has their own. First-time voters, in addition to those governing what identification all voters must show at the polls, first-time voters may face additional requirements. The Federal Help America Vote Act mandates that all states require identification from first-time voters who register to vote by mail and have not provided verification. The act lists a current and valid photo ID or a copy of a current utility bill, bank statement, government check, paycheck, or other government document that shows. Digital ID. In recent years, states have introduced digital options for driver's licenses and IDs. These IDs are often accessed through phone applications. Some states statutorily permit the use of digital IDs to vote, while other states prohibit them. States that allow digital IDs in a simple form of identification are Arkansas, which is Republican, Colorado, and Louisiana. States that prohibit them are Georgia and Tennessee. Voter ID laws. Montana, 2025 enacted permitting certain photo student IDs as valid voter IDs. West Virginia enacted requiring photo ID to vote. Wisconsin, where voters approved a constitutional amendment enshrining existing photo ID requirements. Indiana enacted SB 10, specifying educational institution IDs cannot be used for voting. In 2024, New Hampshire enacted HB 1569, removing processes to cast provisional bailout without photo ID. In 2023, Nebraska enacted requiring photo ID beginning in April 2024. Idaho enacted removing student ID from acceptable voter IDs. Wyoming enacted allowing concealed carry permits. North Carolina State Supreme Court reversed earlier ruling and restored the voter ID law. I'm not going to go through every single state here, but it goes back to 2016. So, as you see, each state has laws. As you see, each state has laws requiring ID verification to vote. It doesn't necessarily have to specify who they are, whether they're an American citizen or they are neutralized or they are immigrants. It doesn't specify. It just says these are what we have to do. And who do voter ID laws keep voting? In Texas, registrants without ID filed a reasonable impediment declarations are ID'd before voting. Why do some states why? And here we go. Why do some states? Which states do not require an ID to vote in person? More than 30 states, according to the National Conference of State Legislators, have laws requesting or requiring voters to show some form of identification at the polls. 9 of those states have what are considered strict photo ID laws, and another 3 have strict non-photo ID laws. What does this mean? It's simple. Some states require an ID with a photo verifying the voter, such as a driver's license, state-issued ID, tribal ID, military ID, or any other forms, as explained by the NCSL. Other states accept non-photo identification, such as bank statements with name and address or other document. Does your state allow same-day voter registration? The states below require a photo ID. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida. The ID also needs to have a signature on it. Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa. Another registered voter could, however, attest to the voter's identity if they do not have an ID with them. Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Wisconsin. Most of these are Republican states. The majority of the states that I mentioned are Republican. Voters in Michigan with a photo ID must present it at the polls by law, but a voter can cast their ballot without a photo ID if they sign an affidavit stating they are not in possession of a valid photo ID. Texas, the Republican state, has a similar requirement. Meanwhile, these states require non-photo IDs, but they also accept photo IDs to vote in person. Alaska, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, North Dakota, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Arizona will accept either one photo ID, 2 forms of identification with a current address or a photo ID, and a form with a current address on it. Montana will accept a photo ID or other forms of identification that list a voter's name and current address. Oregon, which conducts voting by mail in ballots, does not require a photo ID when registering voters. Utah, which also primarily votes by mail, requires either a photo ID or 2 forms of alternative IDs, while Washington is also primarily a vote by mail state. Those who want to vote in person need to provide identification or sign a ballot of declaration. Now, the remaining states and Washington, D.C. do not require any documentation to vote at the polls. California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, a Republican state, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. First-time voters in these states and the District of Columbia may need to bring a photo ID or document with their name and address on it. Voters Voters who forget to bring the necessary identification to the polls may have to complete an affidavit confirming their identity or use a provisional ballot, the latter of which may require additional steps to ensure the vote is counted. When in doubt, be sure to check with your local election officials about what you need to vote. And there you have it. This already exists. This already exists. And it's up to the states to make those laws. So even if you don't have an ID, you're signing an affidavit. And even an election official could go to jail for trying to commit fraud, to try to try to rig the election, or to try to bend the rules. So yes, even an election official can do that. So voter ID laws do exist. They just vary from state to state, as I've just mentioned. So the fact that the government is trying to add this provision into a bill to avoid a shutdown is idiotic whatsoever. And this is exactly what it is. It's a Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It's called SAVE, SAVE. It was introduced in the 2025-26 Congress, which requires individuals to provide documentary proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. It amends the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 to mandate that states verify citizenship and remove non-citizens from voter rolls, except for one problem. Non-citizens cannot register to vote. That has been from day one. Because if you're not an American citizen, you can't vote, you can't serve on a jury, you cannot be president of the United States. So if you can't be a jury member, if you can't be the president of the United States, how can you vote? They're all connected to each other. And what they're proposing here is proof of citizenship, where applicants must provide specific documents such as a passport, birth certificate, or photo ID to register, which we already do. They already do it. States must establish programs to identify and remove non-citizens from voter registration lists. They have this too. Because if you have to sponsor somebody for work, I believe that's what we call a green card or a work visa. Because when you want an application and it says, do you need any sponsorship to work here? And I believe we call it a work visa or a green card. So this is already done. Penalties. The bill allows for private right of action against election officials who fail to enforce these requirements and establishes penalties. Election officials are trained every year. I know this because I do it myself. And we are trained every year what to look out for, what to notice and what not, and how to proceed should things that are irregular be occurring. So this is all done in a training, and there's actually an entire manual with this. And not only that, we have to take a test afterwards to make sure we understood the class we were in. So this is already something that's been going on for years. Opponents argue the bill ensures only citizens vote, while opponents contend it creates barriers for millions of Americans lacking readily available documents. And by that, and I'm going to explain by that, what about rural communities that live in the middle of nowhere? And it's hard for them to register, to get their registration, or it takes longer than most people because they have to travel hours and hours and hours to do it, or mailing it in, and that takes longer. And that's where you get mail-in ballots from. Other legislation in this act is focusing on election security funding for voting equipment and cybersecurity, which is kind of ironic because Donald Trump just announced he wants to get rid of cybersecurity for the elections. That's so ironic. And think about that for a second. He wants to get rid of cybersecurity. And listen to the irony of that sentence. because all these election officials said that the 2020 election was the most secure election in history. And they have all the safeguards in place. Now, if you get rid of the cybersecurity, the opposite happens because then the elections aren't secure, and that means without the cybersecurity there, it's easier to rig the election. Donald Trump said it himself. He openly said this. He openly was committing a crime by saying, nationalize the elections, close down cybersecurity. Now, if you read between the lines here, this is Russia's name all over it. Because if you understand, it was already proven that Russia meddled in the elections at 1 year. Russia meddled in the elections. And Russia's going to help Trump win. In New York, a state-level gun control law that implemented stricter gun regulations. In Congress, a bill regarding Medicare coverage for fall prevention services. So, I have a question. Why is Congress more concerned about about the election, than they are about gun control? Has anybody ever thought about that? Why are they not trying to regulate gun control, but they're trying to meddle in the election that states can easily fix on their own? Because Trump told them to, because Trump is a lunatic. Now, I want to be more clear on this so people can't come back to me and say, I don't know what I'm talking about. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, SAVE, would amend the National Voter Registration Act to require voter registration applicants to provide documentary proof of U.S. citizenship to vote in federal elections. A similar bill passed out of the a similar bill passed out of the House in 2024, but stalled in the Senate. In the states that verifying citizenship for voters is the most significant elections trend, NCSO is tracking this year. Over 160 bills have been introduced, offering a wide variety of approaches to ensuring only eligible U.S. citizens can vote. Some ask the voter to take action. Others give state election officials tools to check citizenship status. In 2024, New Hampshire and Louisiana both passed bills requiring documentary proof of citizenship to register, and Wyoming is the first state to do so in 2025. States are constitutionally vested. Keyword here, states are constitutionally vested with the power to regulate elections, and every year they consistently consider over 2,500 bills nationwide and enact 300 laws plus or minus addressing various election issues, all in line towards continuous improvement. That first line, states are constitutionally vested with the power to regulate elections, which means states, not the federal government, have the power to make their election laws. Because if I'm voting in New York, if I'm voting in New Jersey, if I'm voting in Rhode Island, or if I'm voting in Alabama, we're all voting in the same elections. We're all voting in the same elections. Okay? But this is how the elections work. In the presidential election, you need 270 electoral votes to win. It's not a popularity contest. It doesn't matter if I have 200 votes. It doesn't matter if I have 200 electoral votes, but I have more of a popularity vote. Irrelevant. I can be the most popular candidate that has more popular votes than do that 12 votes. But unless I have 270 votes, I'm not going to win. Popularity or not. Elections are not a popularity contest because if they were, Donald Trump would never have won. So, voter ID laws exist. They are there. Mail-in ballots exist. They are dear. There is nothing fraudulent about mail-in ballots. You are not, in fact, if I mail in my ballot to where they're supposed to be, you are not legally allowed to open those ballots until election day. So if election day is November 3rd and I mail in my ballot October 15th and you receive it on October 20th, you cannot open that envelope until election day by law. If I open it up anytime before election day, I can get arrested and go to jail. Can I open the envelope after election day? Absolutely. But after all the votes are counted, you then open up every single mail-in ballot, and then you start to count those. When you're finished counting that, you add it to the to the rest of the counting results. That is it. You cannot open them. This is non-negotiable. This is the law. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not. So, is it rigged? You tell me. But only Congress has the right to get rid of mail-in ballots. You can sign whatever executive order you'd like, Mr. President. That doesn't mean it takes effect. And if you get upset because I'm not, and that's your problem. And also, the fact that Pam Bondi is giving Minnesota an ultimatum by saying, give us the voter rolls, we'll get rid of ICE. Well, that's a federal crime, and you can go to jail, and you should be disbarred from suggesting that. And let's take it for what it is. This is all of these people doing the bidding of their master, Donald J. Trump, who wants the voter rolls because he wants to control the elections. He wants to seize the Dominion machines. And all these states, at least all of these Democratic states, are suing Donald Trump for this. And it doesn't matter what you think of him or not. When he's saying, and I've been saying for months, even before he became president, I've been saying for months, he wants to invoke martial law. He wants to, this is all a distraction. He wants to be a dictator. And he said it during his campaign, he said it as black and white, I am going to be a dictator on day one, just so I can implement a few things. No. If you're a dictator, you're a dictator. There's no such thing as I'm a dictator in year one. Now, I'm going to go with this one. What does it mean to nationalize Trump says, and people should be aware of this. And I happen to agree with Rand, and I don't always agree with Rand Paul, but he said something like this: Rand Paul and Trump's call to nationalize elections, that's not what the Constitution says. And for once, I actually agree with him. Trump is basically trying to say, fuck the Constitution. I am the president. I make the laws. Do what I say. Do what I say or else. That's what he wants to do. But that's but Rand Paul's right. The president cannot pick and choose laws that he likes. The Constitution is there for a reason. Without the Constitution, we don't have a republic anymore. We have an authoritarian state. Or we can go back to having a king, which is why we became the United States in the first place, to get rid of being ruled under a king. Although Rand Paul did note that the Supreme Court does limit states in some ways, such as by barring them from setting different rules for some issues, including term limits. But he said the Constitution gives states the power to determine the time, place, and manner of elections. So when Trump is trying to interfere by trying to nationalize elections, he's basically saying because states are an agent of the federal government, we have a right to set the rules and the laws the way we want the states to follow them. That's not even a thing. I don't even know. And you know what? And I'd love to know. I'd love to be a psychologist looking inside Trump's brain. I'd like to know where he comes up with these asinine ideas that have no basis in any reality that I know of, or who's giving him this advice. Because whoever's giving him this advice has no idea what they are talking about. And I'm pretty sure he's getting advice from Steve Bannon, Michael Kelly, Vladimir Putin, and maybe just for shits and giggles, Viktor Orban. Let's just say. And when somebody like Steve Bannon, who's already been to prison for this, and saying, I should be surrounding election poll sites, that's got to make you start wondering, is he for real? That ICE is going to come and intimidate us to get us to vote for who we want? Well, they either want that, or A, people are going to be so afraid to come out to vote that Trump can say, I won the election because nobody came to vote. No, they'll go vote. They'll just do it by absentee. And they'll do the mail-in ballot, which Trump can then say, mail-in ballots are illegal, so it doesn't count. But it doesn't work that way either. States, by law, Constitution says states have the right to set what they want when it comes to election laws. And no president, and every president has honored that every president before Trump know the laws. And by the way, most presidents were either congressmen first, lawyers, or governors. And so they all knew the laws. And look, when you look at the redistricting of the maps and the gerrymandering, okay? When Texas did it, Governor Gavin Newsom said, okay, if you want to do it, so we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it the legal way. And we're going to put it on the ballot and have the people of California vote for it. And they did. And surprise, surprise, the Department of Justice went and sued the state of California for saying what they did was illegal. Or something to that effect. But how is it illegal when the people voted for it like a democracy? Gavin Newsom said himself, we'll do the same thing that Texas is doing, but we're going to do it the legal way. We're going to do it the way the democracy wants it to be done. And we're going to have people vote for it. And they did. They waited hours online just to have their voice heard. And you know what? They won. But then the administration went and sued them. But here's the question. How come Texas can do it, but when California follows suit, the administration says, fuck off. You can't do it. It's illegal, but we can do it. I tell you what, Donald Trump, how about you fuck off and say, good for me, but not thee? No, you want to do it because you want to steal the election and you're openly stealing the election. But you're going to sue California because you don't want them to redistrict, because then that takes away Republicans' seats, which means you have a better chance of losing. But they did it by the book. The minute they do it, and Governor Abbott, like a little puppy dog, said, okay, sir, we're going to do it. Same with Florida. Ron DeSantis, okay, sir, yes, Your Highness, we will do it, no problem. We're going to go ahead and do it, and they did. And guess what? California ruled in favor of California's redistricting. The Supreme Court surprisingly said California did it the right way. They did it legally. We are not going to take that away from them because the people voted. And who are we to take away their voice? And you have to respect Gavin Newsom for opening his mouth and not giving a shit what Donald Trump says. He knows that Donald Trump hates his guts. He knows that Donald Trump will curse him out, calling him new scum, and speak out against him, and spread whatever bullshit lie he wants. Newsom knows this. But he's also going to speak the truth. You hate him for that? Okay. But if he doesn't stand up, who will? And all it takes is one person. Um, but and it's very simple. All you have to do is read these whole things. This isn't about elections. This isn't about the Epstein files. This isn't even about immigration. This is Donald Trump trying to control everything. It's all about the power. It's all about control. He can care less about laws. He can care less about what the Constitution says or what states have or what they can't do. This isn't anything about it. This is simply about Donald Trump trying to take over the entire world and control everything until he's dead. And he said the same thing with the Epstein files. He looked at the Epstein files and said, it absolves him. Like, are you fucking retarded, sir? I mean, it absolves you? His name is everywhere. And I read that Epstein files. Oh, I read most of it. And I've never seen someone's name mentioned so many times on one page. And you have to wonder, and now it makes sense to me why he's been doing everything he could to deflect from it. Because there are a lot of people on there that Donald Trump knows. And if you notice, since the Epstein files were released, there's been a lot of fall from that. You've had people losing their jobs. You've had Republicans from Congress either retiring or leaving, or resigning, I'm sorry. And Donald Trump is saying, it absolves me. And he believes it's a hoax. Well, okay. Then if you believe it's a hoax, then why would you sign the bill into law to release the Epstein files? Because if it's a hoax, that means it's not real, right? That means it's a joke. And if it's a joke, then what the hell did Congress sign? What the hell kind of a bill did Congress create? And then the senators voted on. Because if it's a hoax, then did they just waste their time making up some bull? And it was a Democratic hoax. Did they not just waste their time on bullshit nonsense that apparently doesn't exist? That you signed into law? And then you have the idiot Todd Blanchard says, we're done. We've released what we had to release and we're done. No, you're not done, asshole. The law says release all the files. You don't get to pick and choose. And as a lawyer, you should know how the law works. You don't get to pick and choose what you want to release. When the Democrats made that bill, and it was Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, one is a Democrat, one is a Republican. When they made the bill, they specifically added that it's got to be a law, and they specifically subpoenaed because they knew that Pam Bondi isn't trustworthy and would play the games. And you don't get to pick and choose what the law says you can and cannot do. You cannot go to a court and tell a judge, Your Honor, it was no big deal. He did it, the person's dead, they're not coming back. Oh well, we have the info. We have the info we needed. That's all that matters. It doesn't work like that. And all of these ICE agents think they're above the law, but you can't be law enforcement. But you can't call yourself law enforcement and then commit execution in broad daylight. You can't commit cold-blooded murder in broad daylight and then say you're law enforcement. You can't go into someone's house without a warrant and then say you're law enforcement. You can't say that somebody brought a gun to a protest and then take the gun away and say you're law enforcement if the person's not breaking the law. Because there's no law that says you can't have the gun. I can understand if somebody brought a gun to a protest and the gun was illegal. And I don't mean against the Constitution. I mean the gun wasn't registered to him. It wasn't registered to her. It was registered to somebody else, and they're carrying the gun illegally. But when it's legal, what are you talking about? And you have this shutdown. And it's a very simple. And by the way, it all makes sense now. They took away your health. They took away our health care. They took away our food stamps. You know why? They needed the money to fund the ICE. They needed the money to fund the Gestapo. That's where they got the money from. By punishing every single American. They take away your health care. They take away your food stamps. But guess who's benefiting from that? The Department of Homeland Security's ICE division. And that's what the shutdown's about. Because, and I have to agree with and as a Democrat, I have to agree with this. And any Republican who's fighting to say we need to fund the ICE, then you're an accomplice to murder. Then you're an accomplice and you're in cahoots with the ICE because you're okay with what they are doing. And your common sense and credibility is pretty much out the window, and you might as well get the fuck out of Congress and the Senate because you have no morals, you have no decency, and you betrayed every single one of your constituents that actually voted for you to be in that seat. And I get the fact that so the whole shutdown is Democrats are saying we're okay with ICE. We're okay with ICE. But we want reforms. Why is it so hard? We want to rein them in because they're out of control. We want them to wear body cams. We don't want them to wear masks. And if the police could wear body cams, why can't ICE? If they're law enforcement, then shouldn't they follow the law? I mean, shouldn't they follow the law? In fact, here, what is ICE's? In fact, what do the Democrats want to reform with the ICE bill? And it's very simple. What Democrats are demanding in the ICE, and this is what they want. Democrats want stricter requirements for judicial warrants as ICE agents make arrests and enforcement operations. DHS oversees ICE and its policies, and that's a reasonable request. Because by law, a police officer cannot arrest you without a warrant. And if they don't read you your Miranda rights, then you're free to go because you are entitled to have your rights read to you. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be provided for you. That's a simple fact. ICE cannot just say, we don't need a warrant to arrest you. And they're not police. And they're walking around wearing vests that say law enforcement police. Except police and law enforcement are not the same. Police don't enforce federal law. The police in New York City aren't law enforcement agents. There's only so much they're allowed to do. In fact, a police officer and a detective are not the same either. Detectives are cops, yes, but they're homicide. They don't drive cop cars and they don't wear uniforms. They're different. But they work in the police department, yes. They have friends who are police officers, yes. Detectives used to be police officers, but now they're not. ICE agents use administrative warrants issued internally by immigration authorities to arrest people. Federal agents require a warrant signed by a federal judge to forcibly enter private residence and spaces, something that ICE does not do, and something that the Fourth Amendment strictly says must be done. You cannot come into my house. Cannot come into my house without a warrant. It's called a search warrant. If you come into my house and force your way into my house and then have me arrested for refusing you admission, then you're breaking the law and I am free to, and you can't arrest me. I have a right to tell you, get the fuck out of my house because you don't have a right to be here. That's why if somebody wants to come, that's why if a law enforcement officer comes to my door and tells me why they're here, I have a right to say, do you have a warrant? Let me see the warrant. That's by the book. And yes, you will show me that warrant. And I will let you into my house if the warrant checks out. But you have no right to enter private property. And if you're arresting me because I'm resisting, what am I resisting? My property. You have no right to walk into my property. You want to kick me out? You're arresting me because I won't let you come in because you're accusing me of hiding somebody. Fine. If you suspect that I'm hiding somebody, so they don't get deported, okay, fine. Then get me the warrant. Get me the warrant, and then I will gladly let you into my house. And if you're but don't call yourself law enforcement if you ain't following the law, because being a law enforcement officer means you follow the law. It's like being a doctor and committing malpractice. If I'm a doctor and I kill a patient on purpose, or I'm committing malpractice, or I'm not obeying my Hippocratic oath, yes, I can lose my license to be a doctor. I can lose my, just like all of these people in the Georgia for the election, all of them got debarred. They lost their license to practice law because they were pulling a scheme that was in violation of federal law, violation of state law, and violation of elections laws, and they lost their licenses. So you can't call yourself a lawyer and not follow the law. You can't call yourself a law enforcement officer and decide the laws don't apply to you because you're doing the bidding of the President of the United States. That doesn't make any sense. However, an internal memo in January told agents they did not need a judicial warrant to enter these private spaces, according to the Associated Press. Democrats have indicated they want tighter use of warrants in immigration actions. What is wrong with that? House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries told ABC News on Sunday that tightened judicial warrant restrictions for immigration enforcement operations would be a condition in moving forward on funding for DHS. Many Republicans appear opposed to this reform. Can't imagine why. Now we go to the lapdog. Speaker Mike Johnson pushed back on this demand on Tuesday, calling it an unworkable proposal. This is a road we cannot and should not go down. Translation, my master Trump told me not to entertain this. Additionally, Democrats want to see an end to ICE agents roving patrols during immigration enforcement operations. Okay, but I'd like to go back to say that Speaker Johnson says this is an unworkable proposal. First of all, how would he know? Did he even try? Did he even try? You could say it's an unworkable proposal. Yes, you can. But did you even bother? But he's not even going to bother to try. He's just saying it's an unworkable proposal, in quotes, and saying that is where we cannot and should not go down. First of all, you're Speaker of the House. So why the fuck is Donald Trump dictating to you what should be done? There's a reason why there are 3 separate branches of government. And no president, to my knowledge, has ever told Congress what to do. That is what the Speaker of the House is for. You would never see Nancy Pelosi tell Joe Biden what he should do. You would never see Joe Biden telling Congress what they should do and what's required. You would never see Newt Gingrich telling Reagan the same exact thing. So no, it's not unworkable, and it's not something we cannot and not. It's my master, Donald Trump, doesn't told me specifically not to entertain the thought, and therefore I won't. Well, okay, Trump's bitch. You have well, clearly what you're basically saying is, I don't have a mind on my own. I can't think for myself. So I'm going to take the advice from my cult master, my MAGA king, Donald Trump, because he knows better than me. So whatever. Then you know what? Get rid of the Speaker of the House. And by the way, and this is why when they didn't have the votes for Mike Johnson to be reelected, this is why Trump convinced all of them to change their vote to get Johnson reelected, because he needed a scapegoat. And he needed someone that he can bully around and push. And we're seeing that in Johnson. And Johnson talks about his Christian values and all of this. Bullshit. Because if he was a good Christian person, he would do what's right, morally and ethically, and not take orders from Donald Trump. He would have the balls to tell Donald Trump, fuck you. I'm in Congress, not you. I'm the Speaker of the House. I decide what's voted on in Congress, not you. I decide what we're working on, and not you. So if you're going to talk about Christian values, then at least have the decency to at least show that you actually give a damn. The next thing they want is Universal Code of Conduct for Use of Force. Schumer asked DHS to institute a code for conduct for all federal officers, including ICE agents. The Democratic leader said this code should mirror those held by federal and state law enforcement officers. At a Democrat-led public hearing on DHS reform on Tuesday, committee member Senator Richard Blumenthal said if a local cop can be sued, so should an ICE agent or a CBP official. He's not wrong. If police can, and if you remember, in Minnesota, the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin had a trial. If you remember, and he's now in jail. He's no longer a cop. So yeah, if I can sue a doctor, if I can sue a lawyer, if I can sue an FBI agent, why can't I sue an ICE? If they're a federal officer, if an FBI agent is a federal officer, and I can sue an FBI agent, if an ICE is a federal officer, why can't I sue them? If I can sue a TSA agent that's under the DHS, then why can't I sue an ICE agent? See? They're trying to have it both ways, but it's contradictory to the other stuff. You can't pick and choose who's going to get arrested, and you can't pick and choose who can follow the law and who can't. If they have to follow the law, then so do they. And if it's the same department, then the rules should apply for every single person. You don't get to pick and choose. If that was the case, I would go outside and choose to wield an axe out in the open and just chop people's heads off and say, the law doesn't apply to me because, didn't apply to him, didn't apply to them. So if they can rob a bank and get away with it, why can't I be an axe murderer and chop people's heads off? Well, we want to make an example, so we're going to use you. But it doesn't. I said, really? Why can you make an example of the bank robber or the guy that just blew up a building? Why can't you make them an example of? Well, we don't like you. Well, great. I don't like you either. But that's not how the law works. You don't get to decide who is going to be sued and who's not, who's going to be made an example of because of your bias, because you don't like the person. Okay. If that's the case, we still wouldn't have the population. And Blumenthal, by the way, serves on the ranking member on the Senate's permanent subcommittee. He goes, for right now, I can promise that I will not support another dime for Department of Homeland Security unless there is this fundamental far-reaching reform, in effect, a rebuilding of the agency. Senator Dick Durbin, the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee, advocated for implementing accountability standards by saying a uniform code of conduct will rein in aggressive and excessive immigration enforcement, bring about accountability, and hopefully begin the long process of restoring trust. And when immigration agents fail to follow that code of conduct, the Department of Homeland Security must coordinate with state and local officials to conduct a fair and independent investigation. Following the killings of Renee Good and Alex Peretti by federal agents in Minneapolis last month, local law enforcement said DHS shut them out of investigations into their deaths. After investigators were denied access to the scene where Peretti was shot, despite receiving a signed judicial warrant, Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Superintendent Drew Evans said the agency was in uncharted territory. There certainly can be a new process going forward if the federal government would like to do that, and federal agencies, but that has not been a discussion that's been had, so we can provide clear understanding to citizens to understand what that process will be. And the reason why DHS doesn't want Minneapolis involved is because it'll interfere with their narrative. It'll interfere with their narrative, because their narrative is what Kristi Noem and Greg Bavino said. And ironically, and not surprisingly, they both said the same thing. And when Kristi Noem was really saying about why did he have a gun and who bring, well, first of all, anything that Kristi Noem says, I don't believe, because this is the same person who shot her defenseless puppy and felt no remorse for it, even bragged about it in her book and said, I will do it again in a heartbeat. So if you have no remorse for your own pets, then why the hell would you have any remorse for a fellow human? And when Donald Trump said, I am not firing Kristi Noem, and added, for what reason, meant he's either oblivious, clueless, or just doesn't really give a shit because this is what he wants, and he's getting off on it. But I can tell you, and by the way, if he didn't fire Pete Huskett for the signal scandal, he sure as shit ain't going to fire Kristi Noem for something that's way, way worse. But the Senate already had said, the Democrats already said they gave the ultimatum, either resign or be impeached. She's not going to be fired, and she's certainly not going to resign, which leaves only impeachment. And if she gets, and she would be impeached. If the Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate, she would be impeached. ICE would be abolished, or at least reformed the way the Democrats want it to be. And this would be an entirely different conversation. The next requirement the Democrats want is mask ban, body cameras, and ID requirements. Secretary Kristi Noem announced on Monday that all federal immigration agents in Minneapolis will now be required to wear body cameras amid bipartisan congressional pressure. Great. It doesn't mean they'll be turned on. She might just have them wearing it just to shut everybody up, but that doesn't mean she's going to have them turn it on. She said that the procedure would roll out through the department as funding became available. In a post on the social platform on Twitter, Schumer called the change the bare minimum. I want to be very clear, he says. Kristi Noem doesn't get participation points by saying agents will start doing what they should have done all along. This is the bare minimum and should apply to agents nationwide, and there is still so much to do. Democrats are also pushing for a mask ban and identification requirements of federal agents. DHS has said that masks protect their agents from being doxxed. And that's bullshit. That's bullshit. It basically prevents them from having any accountability, because if they're wearing a mask, you cannot identify them. Being doxxed, I can do that. All I have to do is find out where they live and do it that way. And disclaimer, I'm not doing that. I'm giving you an example. Okay? So that excuse is BS. Because if that's the case, then why don't the FBI wear masks? Why don't police wear masks? Why don't the CIA wear masks? Why don't TSA agents wear masks? Why don't Border Patrol agents wear masks? So Kristi Noem's bullshit excuse doesn't make any sense. It's what she's not telling you is because they don't want accountability. And that's the same reason why she got triggered when somebody mentioned the name Jonathan Ross. And she went batshit crazy and said, don't mention his name! Don't mention his name! Why? And that's why he's being protected somewhere. We don't know where. But not a moment once the murder was committed for Renee Good, they immediately took him, his wife, and the rest of his family to some protection program. The Democrats are also the FAQ section on the department's website said doxing has put ICE officers and their families at risk. All ICE law enforcement officers carry badges and credentials and will identify themselves when required for public safety or legal necessity. The website says that is a lie because when people were heard on videos asking for their IDs to be for ICE agents to show their ID, they said we don't need to do that, but show yours. They were caught on video saying that. They don't carry badge credentials because they never show it. Because if they don't show their warrants, then why would they show their badge? However, Democrats argue, rightly so, that officers' practice of masking and not displaying ID badges erodes accountability in these operations, and they are correct. Kristi Noem is gaslighting by making up bullshit reasons why they need to be masked. Which is why, when she says they're getting body cams, you shouldn't trust her. Because anybody can put a body cam on them. But are they going to be turned on? That's the question. And even if they're turned on, will they surrender the footage to local enforcements when asked? Or are they going to hijack it? So that's what Democrats, and they're like, Republicans have indicated changes to a mask and ID policy amount to nearly a non-starter. And you have to wonder, why are Republicans protecting Kristi Noem? Why are they agreeing with her and saying, we're not going to allow this. We are not going to allow this. You want masks? You don't want the masks? You don't want body cams? We run the house, not you. This is what we want. Why? Are you okay with the murder of Renee Good? Are you okay with the cold-blooded murder of Alex Peretti? Are you okay with ICE not following the law? Are you okay with this? Then you're just as guilty and you should pay the price. Mike Johnson said, these two things are conditions that would create further danger. Is he out of his fucking mind? Is he out of his fucking mind? He says, when you have people doxing them and targeting them, of course we don't want their personal identification out there on the streets. So who's a bigger moron here? Mike Johnson, puppy killer Noam, or Republicans that are saying this? Like, so what they're okay with, so what they're basically saying is, we can do whatever we want because we're law, because we're ICE, and we're just doing the bidding of Donald Trump, and it doesn't really matter because the law doesn't apply to us because the president said we're okay. Is that what you're saying? And I'm not gonna. And there's so much I can say here about this, but basically saying this is why if we have a shutdown, and once again, if the shutdown happens, guess what they're going to do? They're going to blame the Democrats as usual, and saying and they're going to make up some bullshit story again, which I'm going to go and say they're going to say like something like the Democrats don't care about safety. They'd rather they'd rather have their agitators and things like that, and they're going to say we don't want ICE. That they're trying to get rid of ICE. No one is saying get rid of ICE. What they're saying is ICE is out of control and they need to be reined in, keep them in check. Why do Republicans, and this is the same thing that happened last time with the healthcare. This is why we had the shutdown the last time. And like last time, they blamed us Democrats for it, even though the Republicans were the ones who took it away and refused the amendments that the Democrats had offered. And the Democrat, and let me tell you something. Donald Trump knows he would lose the midterm elections. Donald Trump knows this. And this is why he doesn't want, and this is why he's coming up with this bullshit, nationalize the elections and Republicans should do it. And the keyword is saying Republicans should take it over. Because he knows people have had enough of him, and he knows he's going to lose the midterm elections, and he knows that the Democrats will retake the control of us in the Senate, and then In his words, will the Democrats find a reason to impeach him? They will not find a reason to impeach him. There's plenty of impeachable offenses here. In fact, if I were the Democrats, I'd have him arrested. I'd have him arrested, thrown in jail, and put on trial for all to see. That's what I would do. And all I'm going to say about this is we got to be very careful right now because they're openly telling us you will not be voting in the election unless we tell you who to vote for. And if you don't vote for who we tell you to vote for, we're going to have you arrested. That is not a free and fair election. And that is not a democracy. That is fear and intimidation and bullying because you are not doing what they're asking you to do. And then, and as Benjamin Franklin said, or public if you can keep it. And we are on the verge of losing our republic. But as we see, we're getting a lot of falling out from this. People have seen what's going on here. People are starting to realize, and people are starting to wake up. Is it too late? Maybe, but it's not late enough. But it's not late that we can't do anything. The midterm elections are in November, and Donald Trump is saying now openly, Republicans nationalize the elections. Steve Bannon is saying ICE will surround the elections. And 6 years later, he's obsessed with the election, saying that he won the 2020 election. This man cannot let go of the past. Who fucking cares? Big deal. So the elections are over. Stop being a crybaby. Stop having your temper tantrum and be a man and accept the results. There's nothing you can do about it now. There's nothing you can do about it now. So he takes all the ballots from Fulton County. The results aren't going to change unless mysteriously he somehow rewrites the election campaigns and finds that indeed he won. The votes won't change. And even if by some miracle they changed, what is he planning on doing? What's he going to do? Arrest Joe Biden? This man cannot let it go. 6 years later, this is 2020, we're now in 2026. He's the president now. He didn't win the election in 2020. Nothing he's going to do is going to change that. But he is trying now openly to rig the election. He even said today he did not weaponize the Department of Justice, but now is questioning if he can do that, which is pretty much gaslighting because we all know that he didn't. We all know that he did. So be very careful. We've seen the Epstein files, and I know not to talk about that, but this was more important about what I was discussing. And we do have immigration laws in this country, and I do agree that they need to be fixed. I do agree that they need to be amended. And I do agree that and I do agree. We do need immigration reform. I 100% agree with that. I do agree we have an issue with the border. I do agree with that. And if Ellis Island was still in use today, that's where we'd be putting them, into Ellis Island, before they would be able to step foot in America. And I agree. And I agree we have a lot of things that need a lot of work in Congress. I agree that we have a lot of work that needs to be done in government. And even this, and I'm not saying New York, New Jersey, all these states, and I can't speak for them. I can only speak for New York, where I live, you know. And I agree. There are things that need to be done here. I agree that there are a lot of outdated laws in New York that need to be revisited and amended for modern times, for today's standards. And I do agree there are a lot of outdated laws in the federal government that need to be revisited. But unfortunately, we have a government being run by a bunch of hypocritical assholes who only care about their political career. But I do agree that but I do agree that there are a lot of issues that need to be worked on, and I do agree that Americans should have a say in it, and not just by voting in the polls. I do believe that they should have a say in it in town halls. I do believe that when they hold hearings in Congress, I believe the public should be allowed to have a say in that. Um, but unfortunately, we are in the particular. But unfortunately, we are where we are right now. That and all this could have been prevented if the Republicans in Congress had a spine and didn't enable him. Unfortunately, that's what's happening, and and it's only going to get worse. And Donald Trump knows that he's in a lot of trouble, and so he's deflecting and making up a lot of crazy ass bullshit excuses that unfortunately a lot of his base is believing, even though reality it doesn't exist in any reality I know of. Um, but and he knows he's in trouble, so he's making up all these bullshit stories to try to save himself and pin the blame on other people. But it's not too late. We now see that, and he's getting worse, and we now see that he's openly saying what everybody already knew privately. And he's not trying to hide it. But here's the thing. When he says it, he actually believes it. And he thinks what he's saying is okay to do. And that's the problem. That's the problem. That he thinks it's okay. And he doesn't realize. Because Donald Trump is too stupid to realize that what he's saying is treasonous. And what he's saying is what somebody like Kim Jong Un would say. And Donald Trump is not a smart person. Anything he's saying, he's getting advice from other people. Like Stephen Miller, who said Alex Purdy is an assassin, which was never true. And here's the thing. J.D. Vance refused to apologize for the comments that he made about Alex Purdy. But they all demanded an apology from Jimmy Kimmel when he said something about Charlie Kirk that they didn't like. And you have to wonder why the hypocrisy about that. That they're saying all this about Alex Purdy and Renee Good, two people no one ever heard of until they were murdered, and started making up these fairy tale bullshit nonsense things about them. But they won't apologize and just keep going stronger. But when Jimmy Kimmel said something about Charlie Kirk that nobody liked, they wanted his head on a silver platter and demanded an apology. And people who spoke bad about Charlie Kirk lost their jobs. And you have to wonder, which brings back to the point of Republicans saying freedom of speech is good, but only when it applies to us. If a Democrat says it, fuck them all, and they will pay a price. But that is not how the Constitution works. It doesn't say it's good for you, but not for you. It's good for you. It only works if I like the comment, but if I don't like the comment, you're going to get arrested. That's not how it works. The Constitution specifically says freedom of speech allows protesting, allows me to say whatever I want without the worry of being thrown in jail. And that's what they do in authoritarian states. They throw you in jail if you speak out against the opposition. And they call you a traitor to your country. But it also allows me to practice my religion out in the open as much as I like to. And it allows the press to write whatever they want. And when you start arresting journalists, that's what dictators do, to silence the opposition. Because the only journalists that matter are the ones that they want. The only journalists that matter are the ones that are writing good coverage about you. If you throw a journalist in jail, that means you're silencing the opposition and you're trying to keep them from preventing them from writing the truth. So you can't demand an apology from one person for saying something about someone that you don't like, but then making up an entire story about someone you don't even know and refusing to apologize, because that makes you a hypocrite. It also gives you a double standard, because that means it's good for me because I'm the vice president of the United States, so the rules don't apply to me. But hey, you said something about our hero Charlie Kirk. We don't like it, so apologize or expect your show to be off the air. You know what? I'd rather my show be off the air than having to give in to a dictator, because I have my pride and my dignity, and I have my self-respect. And if you're going to cancel my show because I refuse to give in to the Almighty King, because I hurt his feelings when I said something about his hero he didn't like, then so be it. Because my pride and my dignity and my self-respect are more important to me than any show. And as long as I have those three things in me, then everything else is worth it. And it's that self-respect, it's that dignity, and it's that moral compass of ethics that I have that will keep me sane and a proud American. It's everybody else who follows in the cult that will attempt to destroy this country and reshape it into an image of a dictator. That is not the country I grew up in. That is not the country I learned about, and that's certainly not the country that I wanted. And that's not, and that's certainly and that's not the country I'd like to die in. Because if I'm going to die, I'd rather die fighting for what I believe in, fighting for what's right. And if that's going to be my downfall, then so be it.